Quarterback controversy on Rocky Top. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Vols. We got Wes Rucker on the line. He's at Go Vols 247 Sports. Wes, we appreciate you stopping by and breaking down the Tennessee 2-2 situation with Alabama coming to town.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. It's not maybe what we would have expected from Tennessee after the first couple of weeks. Certainly the way things went at Georgia, not necessarily a shock. Tennessee showed the upgrades it's made in talent. It made some nice plays there in the first half, and then in the second half, we sort of read this book and seen this movie before. Some collapsing there on offense, some turnovers, and then that carried right on over into the first half against Kentucky, and here they are at 2-2.
Well, you make a good point, because while Vols fans are mostly disgruntled right now at 2-2, all we have to do is go back 9 days to halftime of that Georgia game, and there's a Tennessee lead, and things are looking good at 2-0 and possibly pulling off a major upset against Georgia. Now, it's gone south since then as Georgia's superior roster took over in the second half, and then this nightmare against Kentucky. So let's get to that in regards to the quarterback situation, because that's what everyone's talking about. 34-7. Jeremy Pruitt, as you well know, and being right there covering the team, and every word coming out of his mouth, he was actually breaking down the play-by-play and saying, hey, we made more positive plays on offense than we have the last few weeks. We're actually making improvements. If you look at the box score and take away the turnovers, which of course you can't with 2 pick sixes, Tennessee outgained Kentucky. Just what's your thoughts on the performance against Kentucky, taking away the score and some of the huge gaffes?
Well, it's two things can simultaneously be true, right? On one hand, if they are executing on a larger percentage of plays, that is a good thing. However, it doesn't really mean anything when you turn the ball over consistently, and not just turn the ball over, just catastrophically do it. Tennessee has had several, pick sixes, fumble sixes, turnovers deep in their own territory. They seem to really self-destruct when things fall apart. I mean, they don't rally around the flag, so to speak, and kind of get that thing tightened up. The defense, I think, to its credit, has done a really good job in those sudden change situations. But when the opposing defense puts it into the end zone, that doesn't really matter at that point. There's nothing they can do about it. So, it's interesting because we have seen this for years with Jarrett Garantano, and I think it's so easy to point the finger at the quarterback when it's so much more complex than that. There's so many issues that go into this. But at the end of the day, he's the quarterback who has been responsible for a lot of really horrible mistakes that you can't have. So it's frustrating because, in this league, it's difficult enough as it is. You're trying to play catch up. And when you do things like you do against Kentucky, that was almost the only way Kentucky could win that football game. And people might look at the score and go, well, obviously, I mean, they blew them out. Not in total yardage. That game, when you watch, Tennessee kind of capitulated there in the second half, or there, especially in the fourth quarter. But Kentucky did not have, I don't think, as much talent as Tennessee. I think Tennessee just sort of self-destructed. And when Tennessee let Kentucky play the way it wanted to play, that was the ball game there. Because if you get up by a score or two on Kentucky, not so difficult to beat the Cats. If they get up on you by a couple scores, the way they run the ball, the way they melt clock, the way they kind of grind you out, it becomes a different ball game. And that's Tennessee just made mistakes you can't make.
Yeah, Terry Wilson going 12 of 15 for 100 yards is pretty much the Kentucky blueprint for the way they want to play offensive football. We got Wes Rucker on the line talking Tennessee. Go Vols 247, and Tennessee's at 2-2 with Alabama coming to town. So in my outside perspective in watching Tennessee play anywhere between 6 and 10 times per year, Garantano has been in a situation where the offensive line has really not helped him out in the early portion of his career. But we came into this season expecting Tennessee to field one of the better offensive lines in the SEC. Do you think that the line is played up to expectations?
It absolutely has not. When you look at running the ball, I think with the exception of the Georgia game, and that Georgia defense is pretty ridiculous. So you're just going to have days like that. But the run blocking in general this season, I think, has been okay. The issue has been pass protection. Tennessee's went into the season and you say, okay, that offensive line, you've got a 6th-year solid senior in Brandon Kennedy right there in the middle at center. and then he's flanked by 4 5-star prospects, 2 on either side of him. That looks pretty good, right? The problem has been it just has not been put together. You know, that Wanye Morris had to go into contact tracing quarantine twice in preseason camp, missed 28 days, and that's a preseason All SEC left tackle. And you know, he's been trying to play catch up ever since. And then he got dinged up against the past couple of weeks, and he hadn't quite been the same. Darnell Wright at right tackle has struggled. I mean, they've moved him to guard tackle. He's more of a guard naturally. The biggest issue that I see is pass protection at the tackle spots. I think kind of box to box there, guard to guard in that guard box, they're okay. They could be better, but they're okay there. You know, Trey Smith and Cade Mays, those guys are going to get paid a lot of money to play this game in the future. Those are good players. They got to get better at tackle. That's right now where, and they've had to slide Mace out there some. You know, Jameer Johnson's been hurt. He hadn't been out there. They've had some issues. So I don't want to sit here and just completely throw them under the bus. But when you look at their actual pass protection numbers, they're not great in terms of pressures allowed. You know, they've been one of the worst offensive lines in college football so far this season in pass protection, and that's just purely statistical. That's not any kind of, you know, subjective analysis. That's looking at the pressures they're giving up. So they got to get that straightened out, or they're going to be in trouble.
The subjective analysis has shown us for years that the team that wins the turnover battle wins the game. And if it's decided, it's 85, 90% of the time. And so to your point about executing the small gains of 5 and 6 yards, they're wiped out when you're throwing 2 pick sixes. And for Garantano, based on at least what I saw, the one throw to the right sideline was just a classically underthrown late out route in which the corner was able to beat the wide receiver to the ball and then take it back the other way. And then the other one, he's scrambling, he's running to his left and probably just did not see the linebacker underneath and threw it right to him. So we're in a situation where I was kind of leading into this before in regards to the offensive line, where I thought they let him down early in his career, but they're from a talent perspective, it's been just an upgraded position. And now we got JT Shroud, who played some against Kentucky, and Harrison Bailey, who comes into the game as a freshman, who obviously doesn't have the reps under his belt. So what do you think is going to happen to this quarterback situation, how it's going to be handled versus maybe how you would handle it?
It's always so easy from the outside looking in to say how you would handle a situation. And I'll give you my opinion, but I'll throw that caveat out beforehand that, you know, obviously I'm not the head coach. I'm not paid in that stratosphere. That's not what I've been trained to do necessarily. But I'll say this, that they have tried really hard to keep Garantano in the lineup because they don't know those other guys are ready yet. But my answer to that would be, what would be the worst case scenario? 2 pick sixes in 3 minutes, because Garantano just did that. So, you know, the book on how to play Garantano is out there. At this point, especially with Tennessee struggling at the offensive tackle spots, pass rushing or protecting the passer, I should say. All you got to do against Tennessee right now is try to get a score early, try to get up a little bit, and then you rush with just front four, because you can get to the quarterback doing that. You drop everybody else, 6, 7 guys back in coverage and put them in a zone. And Garantano will not read that correctly at some point during the game. And that's been the problem, is that they can't really pass protect on the perimeter there. So they're getting pressure from the outside and they're dropping everybody back. And Garantano's having a hard time sometimes knowing where to go with the ball. You should never in a million years throw an out route 50 yards in the air on a 3rd and 4. That's just, I am not an offensive coordinator. I think Jim Chaney is a really good offensive coordinator. I hope that wasn't the primary thing to do on that play, because that was just not a good look. But what I would do now, if I'm Tennessee, I would try to go into this game, and I would say Garantano has proved before they can come off the bench. He's proved that he's resilient. He's been there for 5 years. He may not need as many reps as everybody else during practice. I would start getting the other guys ready. I would go into this game against Alabama, and I would play Shrout and Brian Maurer early if they were ready to go. And then if they weren't playing very well, but the game is still kind of close, maybe you go with Garantano. If those other two are not doing such a good job and the game's out of hand, we'll get Harrison Bailey in there and get him some reps. So I understand the arguments to just throw Bailey out there and see what you've got. But this is a kid who enrolled in January, but then didn't get spring practice. They had 2 spring practices. That's it. And then they had a weird off season, couldn't do a lot. And then he had to go into contact tracing protocol during camp. So he missed a couple of weeks there, and they're trying to get everybody else ready for the season. He's not getting a lot of reps. So it's not anywhere near what you would normally have for a true freshman in terms of being ready to go. So I don't know that I would throw him to the Wolves against Bama. I don't think you play in fear. I don't think you coach in fear, but I think you got to be smart about it. I don't know if I would do that. The problem is if they put Garantano back out there, people have tried really hard. This fan base has tried really, really hard. They've been, I don't want to say patient, but they've been understanding. But if you keep throwing number 2 out there, you're going to cause a riot at some point.
Yeah, and I was remiss in not mentioning Maurer, who's received time and then some spot work in the past. The quarterback and the coach always get the credit and the blame. But in this case, there's also talk about Chris Winkie shouldering some blame as not developing the quarterback position.
Sure. I mean, I think that I wrote in a column over the weekend that, you know, me and my wife, like we're dog people, we're animal people, right? If you got a puppy and he's kind of chewing on some tennis shoes, he's peeing on the carpet, that's a puppy being a puppy, right? That happens. We've all been there. If you've got a 5-year-old dog peeing on the carpet and chewing on your shoes, you don't blame the dog at that point. That's just common sense. Now, is it simple to say that this is all on Garantano? No, I think he is what he is. I think the problem is, what other alternatives do they have? This is the 3rd year of this regime now, 2nd year with Chaney as the offensive coordinator, Winkie still the quarterback's coach. They've had some continuity here. They've had a chance to sign and develop some guys. And if Garantano's out there doing what he's doing and struggling, and you don't feel like you have a viable alternative, that to me is the problem. It's not necessarily that you couldn't work a miracle with Garantano. Okay, it happens. Sometimes guys just aren't as good as you think they are. The fact that you don't have other options, that's where the concern comes into play. And I know it's been a weird year with COVID. I don't want to deny that, because it has been, but this has been a few years now. It's the same song, different verse. At some point, they're going to have to get better at the quarterback spot, or you're going to have to look at the people coaching them. That's just the nature of the job.
My son's a dog trainer, so he'll appreciate the analogy right there.
There you go.
Got
Tennessee. We have a corgi. We have a corgi right now, so they are incredibly smart and stubborn, and it's fun to try to get them, because they will try, and they're smart, but they're almost too smart. So yeah, we're in that right now.
So I got to think, Wes, that Tennessee fans, just like any other college football fans, but especially this fan base, starving for a winner, used to winning long ago, that just the story tradition that's really second in the SEC all time to Alabama. And now it's a situation where we're going on 13 years of really not serious contention. And coming off the big win streak at the end of last year, the bowl win, the comeback against Indiana, and thinking, okay, a game like Alabama is still daunting, but then you get the 2 wins under your belt. And probably 6 quarters ago, Tennessee fans were probably just couldn't wait to get at Alabama. And now it looks like another daunting task. So for you, what does a successful game look like this Saturday?
You know, it's tough, because this is Tennessee, and you should not accept mediocrity in general. You know, this is a place to this day where if you do it right, you win big. You know, Nashville's growing all the time, right? You're getting more and more prospects than ever coming out of there. It's the fastest growing major city in the United States. And it's got a little bit of a transient quality like Atlanta does. And you got a lot of transplants in there. So it's not necessarily kids who grew up dreaming of playing in Tennessee in every case. Bottom line, though, is when you add that on top of the tradition and the facilities Tennessee has, and the things they can do for kids, the platform they can give them, you can win big at Tennessee. The problem is a lot of other people around the league are doing their job right now too. And that makes it more difficult, because in this league, when you get behind, it becomes a nightmare, because that is such a fast pace there up front, and it's hard to stay with those guys. And they're not going to slow down to let you catch up, right? That's not how they work. Georgia, Bama, they're hitting it the grindstone every day. They are getting better every day. They're working hard every day, and they're signing recruiting classes that are just ridiculous, if we're being honest. So you have to beat them 364 days a year at first. That's what you have to do. You have to find a way to do everything better than they do to catch up. And Tennessee is having a hard time doing that. Now, Tennessee has made some tangible improvements for sure. There's no question about it. But when you look at this game specifically, you go, man, they got a long way to go still, because you watch Jalen Waddle on film. I joked earlier this week, Tennessee could maybe guard him if they get Spears. Like that's about the only way that you're going to keep that jitterbug from getting by you. I mean, he's just unbelievably quick. Bama's, not a typical just stout Bama defense, but you still got one of the best corners in college football in Surtain, one of the best linebackers in the country in Moses. You got some pretty good players in safety. You got some big, strong linemen up front. They're going to make it difficult for you, even if they're not what they normally are. And that's just the defense. You're going to have to go score 40 plus points to beat Alabama. I think that offense, Mac Jones is doing his job. Harris and those guys are running hard. Line's doing a great job. The receivers are just ridiculous. I know they had a tight end go down last week, but they got 4 or 5 more of them. That's going to be a game where Tennessee's going to have to score 40 points to even consider winning this game. And I don't know that Tennessee can go score 40 points on a lot of people right now. So if they keep this within a couple scores, I don't want to say it's a moral victory, but it's a sign of progress. Saban's not going to want to rub it in Pruitt's face. He's not like that. He's not going to want to score 60, 70 points in this game and just beat him into the ground. But they're going to go out there and play their game, and you're going to have to try to stop them. And the only pathway I see for Tennessee having any kind of chance in this game is if Tennessee plays out of its mind and Bama turns it over 3 or 4 times. If that happens, okay, maybe you got a game. You get a special team score in there, a defensive score in there, something weird happened like at the beginning of the Georgia game. You get some of those plays, maybe you got a chance, but you just can't have this thing. You can't get behind them, because if you get behind this team, they're just going to suffocate you. That's just what they do.
Talking Tennessee, courtesy Wes Rucker, GoVols247.com, one of the respected sites in college athletics. So please check out his work right there. And certainly, Wes, it doesn't help when you get a shakeup in the coaching staff mid-season. So
sure,
Jimmy Brumbaugh, after 4 years, steps away as defensive line coach. Has the defensive line been a serious issue, or what do you think led to that?
Pruitt has been pretty upset with the defensive line going back to preseason camp. He's not been happy with those guys, because even when they lost Emmett Gooden, he had an off-field incident in the offseason and had to be dismissed. They still brought back, half a dozen or so seniors up front there. And these are maybe not household names, just absolute stars, even though Aubrey Solomon was a 5-star prospect. These aren't like first-round type pick dudes, but they're guys who are big, strong, physical, and have experience in this league. And last season, they may have been the most pleasant surprise on the roster. And then almost all of them came back. So, yeah, I mean, Tennessee thought it was making an upgrade there, defensive line, replacing an old war horse in Tracy Rocker with a younger guy who maybe could coach them pretty well and recruit more actively on the trail. I get why they did what they did. And in all candor, I'd covered Jimmy Brumbaugh at his first coaching job at Chattanooga years ago. So I know the guy has got respect in this business. But it just did not fit. There was something about that was not right. And Pruitt, the defensive line's not been one of their top 3 or 4 or 5 problems, but it's not been great. And I think he thought it could be better. And that was clearly some disagreements on how to move forward there. And Jeremy Pruitt's the boss, so that's what you're going to have. And what's interesting now is that Tennessee's got the highest paid defensive line coach in college football, because Jeremy Pruitt's coaching the defensive line the rest of the season. Now, he was one hell of a defensive coordinator, one of the best in the country, if not the best in the country. But he's also a guy who kind of cut his teeth being a safeties coach and corners coach and defensive backs coach. And, he can certainly coach any position on the field. That's not an issue, but he's normally their cornerbacks coach. And so now you're taking what was your cornerbacks coach and you're putting him at the defensive line coach. And now the head coach is, instead of unofficially a position coach, officially a position coach. So a lot of his attention is going to be put on that when they've got some other areas that need to be fixed. So it is not ideal. It is not what you want. But that leads me to believe what I've heard, which is that they know this is not what they wanted to do, but they felt they had to do it. So you can put 2 and 2 together on that. Something wasn't right, but it's certainly not ideal. I think the defensive line will probably play a little better with Pruitt coaching them, but he's certainly going to have his attention pulled in a lot of different directions now.
Wes Rucker, Go Vols 247. Wes, so much appreciate you stepping on here with us and breaking down the Vols.
No problem. Anytime. Happy to do it.